Dear participants, good afternoon. And this afternoon, we are very honored to invite Dr. Cui Zhenhua, Senior Engineer on Hydraulic Engineering from HRC, to give us a presentation. Dr. Cui got his PhD degree from Nanjing Hydraulic Research Institute, and he has been engaged in policy and technology research on green hydropower, rural electrification, and sustainable development of rural hydropower. So this afternoon, he will share with us his knowledge and experience on green small hydropower and its evaluation, and he will discuss with us the development and the promotion of green hydropower in China. Let's welcome.
Okay, thanks for the introduction. It's my great pleasure to be here to share some experience and practice on the green small hydropower and its evaluation. And this afternoon we'll have two presentations. First is green small hydropower, and next I will also share some experience on the river restoration. So let's start the first part. And for the green hydropower, first I will introduce some of the environmental and the social impacts of small hydropower. And then we'll talking about what have been done by the international society, what is the international practice of green hydropower. And then we will spend more time on the green hydropower practice in China. This is the first presentation. So first I want to share some understandings about the power of rivers. As we know, the hydropower is the power of rivers, right? It can support the economies, it can feed the communities, and the river is also the most productive ecosystem. The hydropower can produce the power to supply the rural economy, and also the water for the irrigation could be feed the community. And the river is also they have a lot of fishes and a lot of it's a productive ecosystem, right? So this is the first thing I want to emphasize. The second thing, we know hydropower is a very clean and renewable energy. Why we call it is renewable? Because the water is evaporated to the atmosphere and fall as a precipitation to the land and back to the ocean through the rivers. While they back to the ocean, if we build a dam and use the hydropower generator, we can get the power, we can get the power, right? So that's why we say it is a renewable energy. And also during the whole generation of electricity, there's no direct pollution. So that's why we call it a clean and renewable energy. And another thing I want to emphasize is there's paintings which was collected in Shanghai Museum. It is the first Chinese painting depicting mechanical facilities. These paintings is more than 1,000 years ago. We could see clearly it is a use of the utilization of power of rivers. And the modern turbine is also very similar to the hydro, right? We could see it also use the same ways to generate electricity, or use the power of rivers to get the coins, to get the foods. So we call, and it is also the same to how to use the water to generate electricity, or use the water to make the food. And you can see the water is diverted to the power and generated the electricity, it is quite similar as sustainable utilization of hydropower. We use the same ways. And we know for the hydropower, it's also very useful for the rural electrification. They use the power rivers to generate the electricity and supply electricity to rural area, rural communities. And the benefit of electrification is mainly on three aspects. First, it's good for the health because the indoor air pollution. If you use the electricity, there will be no indoor air pollution. And also, we can save a lot of time for collecting the firewoods, so the time budgets. And also, it would supply the economic growth, especially for the irrigation, for the productive activities in the rural areas. Right? So this is the three benefits of electricity. But nowadays in China, the attitude towards hydropower changed quite a lot. In the history, it is very useful for the rural development. But nowadays, I just cited some of the titles of the news reports, such as the rivers have been cut off by small hydropower in famous natural reserve of China, which triggered worries on river ecological crisis. And another title of the news report is that more than 45,000 small hydropower is brutal and lots of rivers are chopped. But in the global aspects, we also see a lot of global hydropower generation enjoys a very high increase. So there's a dilemma, right? On one side, we say hydropower is a clean and renewable energy. It is good for the rural electrification. It also the crossroads of water and energy nexus. And it is largely emission free. And nowadays, as a lot of renewable energy has been used in our daily life, the balance emissions and renewables such as wind and solar is also very good function for the hydropower. But on the other side, we know the development of hydropower could reduce the downstream flow, and it changed the hydrological regime of the natural rivers. And if you build a reservoir, there will be some resettlements. And it also lead to intervention into the connectivity of the river system. So there's some good advantages of hydropower and also disadvantages. But we know there's a very fast increase of the install of hydropower generation. So if we want to get more to the hydropower development, what is our attitude and how to how to get the ideas of green hydropower, we need to make more deep analysis of the environmental and social impacts of hydropower. Here I listed some of the relevant laws and regulations. Maybe in different countries, you have different laws and regulations. But if you want to develop a new hydropower projects, you should first to check whether the laws related to hydropower development, such as the National Environmental Act, Water Act, or Land Act, and the National Resource Conservation Act. You should check the laws and regulations to ensure that the development of the projects of hydropower is permitted by the laws in your nations, right? And talking about the impacts of the environmental impacts of the hydropower, we know different types of hydropower with different impacts. For one of the types is the run-of-river types. There's no big reservoirs, but it is caused a river ridge between the dam and the power station. There will be a river ridge that's lead to reduced water or even dry out in this river ridge. And if there's a lot of hydropower development in the same river, there might be some cumulative effects of the cascade hydropower development. Another very typical type of development of hydropower is reservoir, right? We have a big reservoir and the hydropower boundary just below the dam. It is changed the natural and human environment by the impoundment. And also the reservoir make the modification of the volume and seasonal patterns of the river flow, which cause the fragmentation and regulation of the river flow. So this is different impacts by different types of hydropower. And here's in the right side of the picture is a picture I took several years before. It's just below the dam. You can see there's no water there. That is, without a strict management, some hydropower try to divert all the flow to generate electricity, which leaves the river ridge here below the dam dry out. There's no water there, so that caused a very disaster for the fish, for the things living in the water. And that is the runoff river. And for the reservoir type of hydropower, you can see the pictures on the right. The blue curve is the natural flow, and after the building of the dam, the water regime changed to the yellow curve. So the damming truncated the flow extreme, causing both floods and the droughts to become less frequent and smaller in magnitude. For example, for this dam, which has been built in 1970s, you can see below, before the building of the dam, there's a lot of extreme floods and the droughts, but after the building of the dam, have a very smaller flood peak and less frequent and smaller in both the magnitude. So, but we know after the building of the dam, we could reduce the risk of floods and the droughts. It's good for the communities nearby, but it also changed the natural status of the river. So we could see this thing in two different sides. And also for some special rivers, the downstream of the environmental flow release is not always needed, such as highly segmented channel-like rivers and very steep inaccessible river channels. For these rivers, they may not need environment flow. What is the environment flow? I think that be back to this year. Because we make the dam is important for building the better. So the river activity, that's why most develops. One of the most important things is of the rivers, and a lot of methods, hydrological methods, hydraulic habitat methods. Okay. I think you could hear my voice, right? Okay. Well, let's continue. There's some problems with the connection, but now it's okay. In China, we have already published some standards, which is the specification for calculation of the environment flow in rivers and lakes. And in this standards, there's some recommended environment flow for major rivers, larger rivers, small rivers. You know, China is quite large, and also it is decided by the current development degree of the rivers. For some rivers, the development degree is very high, or medium, or low, with different recommendation of the environment, how to calculate the environment flow. And another impact of the development of hydropower is called the hydropeaking. You know, for hydropower plants, they need to generate electricity, use the water to generate electricity. Sometimes they start the operation of the hydropower unit. Sometimes they close down the hydropower unit. But the river reach below the hydropower, you could see the water level changed quite frequent and very fast. That may cause some negative impact of the river reach below the hydropower plants. Here you see the picture in the middle. There's here for the low level, very low water level and high level, the change of the water level is changed very frequently and very fast, which might cause some of the fish is died because they do not have enough time to go back to the river, to the water. And also it caused some impact for the plants in the bank. And that is the impact we call the hydropeaking. And also there might be some measures how to alleviation of the impact of this hydropeaking. Maybe they can change the operation of the hydropower plants to have not very frequently change of the hydropower plants. There are some universities or institutions which was focusing on the research of the hydropeaking. Here is an example in the research base for hydropeaking of Austria. They use there's a reservoir in the upstream, and they control the water flow to simulate the impact of the hydropeaking to try to find some ways to alleviate the impacts of the hydropeaking. And another impact of hydropower development is called the impoundment, right? When you build a very large, very high dam, and the river status be changed from rivers to a lake, right? The lake, the reservoir is similar to the lake, very similar system. So it is a big change for the water ecosystem. In 1920s, there were a lot of species diversity of rivers in 1920s, but after in 1989, there's only 2 species in these rivers. We could not blame the hydropower development for the hydropower development. There's also other reasons, not only hydropower developments, and also others such as the water pollution and also change of the rivers. But the development of hydropower might cause some negative impacts of the river ecosystems. And you know, after the building of a lot of dams and the projects, the negativity of the river basin is very highly impacted. A stream corridor with connections among its natural communities promotes the transport of materials and energy and the movement of the plants and fish and animals in the water, in river. There's an example in Mexico. You could see different scenarios, such as the baseline scenarios in the left and the scenario 21 in the middle. For scenario 21, you could see, and also scenario 7. For these two scenarios, they have the same installation of the unities, hydropower units, but they have the similar energy capacity, but they have very different river connectivity. You could see in the middle, scenario 21, the river connectivity is very low, right? Very short. Only this parts of the rivers is connected together. But if you develop to the hydropower in scenario 7, you could see the impact of the river connectivity is not very high, but they have the same similar energy capacity. That is very typical examples for why we need to think twice about the different developing ways, different scenarios to develop different projects. Maybe first for this two, and then for the other. So which one is developed first? Which one the second? So different scenarios, different activities. But however, we know we are not only consider the activity of the river basins. When we considering projects, we take a lot of factors into consideration. Not only activity of the river basin, but also such as the grid, such as the people lived nearby. So that's we need to consider a lot of factors to make the decision. And there are also some ways how to alleviate the impact of negative impact of connectivity of river basins. We could use the fish paths. There are a lot of fish paths. We use fish paths for the upstream migration and also the downstream migration. We have the nature-like fish paths and the technical fish paths, and also a lot of other ways, matters to for the fish protection, like the screens in the pictures you see, and also some fish paths ways how to, or the fish friendly turbines, right? We use different measures to eliminate the impact of the activity. And also there are some suggestions how to dispatch, how to make the fish paths. Some is correct, and for this one it is not correct because the entrance is too far downstream. And also you need to considering about the maintenance of the fish paths. So there's some technical suggestion how to build the fish paths. Another impact is called the river morphology. During the development of the cities, the township, we sometimes seize a lot of the land in the river bed, right? We use before there are the river bed is quite west, but nowadays a lot of roads or even some crops is in the river bed, which is seized the space of the rivers. That is also another impact of the development. And another impact is called the water quality. You know, the water pollution, such as the turbid water, might occur and affect the drinking water, and especially during the construction period. And also might increase the fish of the disease when you build a dam or create ponds and the mosquitoes comes out. Before we're talking about the the single projects, but after we build a lot of hydropower projects, there might be some cumulative effects of the cascade development of hydropower. In these examples, during this river ridge, you could see a lot of hydropower projects built. They divert the water through the red pipeline or the red tunnel to generate electricity, but leaves quite little water in the river. So this is, if you build a lot of these hydropower plants, the impact is cumulative. So we also consider about the accumulation effect of the cascade development of hydropower. And some of the reports have made summarize of the impact of development of hydropower. So some checklists I think is good for if you need to develop a hydropower plant, such as is the projects consistent with the higher program of policies or plans. So this is very important. You need to first to ensure it is not obey the higher program, higher policies, such as if the project is in the protected park, protected areas such as national park, wildlife protected areas. So especially in China, there are some of the hydropower is built in the protected areas because in the history it not was named as a protected areas, but after maybe 20 or 30 years, the site of the hydropower plant is named as a protected area. So that is very difficult. That is a very difficult scenarios. So before you build the dam, you build the hydropower plants, you need to be sure it is not in the protected areas, or in the future it might be in the protected areas. Your project might be removed or to retired according to the requirements of the environmental protection. And also mark the related potential environmental and social impacts and describe briefly the contents of impact, such as this is summarized like the water pollution during the construction periods, the noise, the water use wise, the land use. That is also the factors we need to consider during the construction and development of the hydropower plants. This is the summarize, especially in the construction periods, such as the temporary diversion of rivers. That is a very high priority because during the construction period, and also the human present during the works on site. The noise, the impact is noise, but this is low. So this is the summary of the possible impacts identified by the environmental impact assessment experts. During the operation period, there's also some very high impact or medium impact or low impact. You can also check this list, such as renewable energy production, the reduction of the pollutants, the modification of habitat is very high priority, and also such as the multiplication of that, and also the alteration of the life quality. So that I think is quite useful for the understanding and possible impacts identified by the EIA experts. And we also know there's some measures how to alleviate the impact of the hydropower development, such as multiple purpose, not just used for hydropower generation, but also used for water supply, irrigation, flood control. And for this example, in China, the reservoir is even used for annoying training base, and it's quite good for the multiple purpose of hydropower plants. And also in China, we have made quite strict management of the hydropower plants, such as the hydropower plants need to install a minimum flow online monitor. Each of the hydropower plants need to have the monitor. Some is online, some is not online, but every hydropower plant in China need to discharge the e-flow, environment flow, and almost all the hydropower plants have online monitor. And another measure is how to alleviate the negative impact of the river is to build some small, very ecological small wells to leave more waters in the river reach. And also another measure is the ecological operation of the power plants. Here we see the pictures here in the left. It is changed from the blue curve to the yellow curves. But if we use the ecological operation of the power plants, that is good for the rivers, and we call it the ecological operation of the power plants, which is a green one. You see, it simulates the natural river patterns. In China's Xiaolangdi hydropower plants, it's every year there will be a period to use the ecological operation of the power plant to discharge more sand to the downward, and also to simulate the natural flow patterns. And also we know the mean for these examples, the hydropower is a very typical case of the water energy nexus. You know, the reservoir is used for the water supply, for the irrigation, it's good for the food, for the water supply, and it is also make the energy generation. So hydropower is very typical case of the water and energy nexus. They can meet both the water and energy needs, which is very important for the whole human society. And here we know there's still about 2.5 billion people have unreliable or no access to electricity. And 2.8 billion people live in areas of high water stresses. If we developed the hydropower plants with reservoirs, we could solve these two problems in the same time. So that's why we use the ways of water and the energy nexus to tackle these two problems at the same time. And for the reservoir, we have a lot of other purpose or functions, such as it could be a national park, water park. It could be good for the navigation, irrigation, fishing, and flood control, water supply, and generation. So we could considering all these different purposes at the same time. So this is very important for sustainable development of hydropower plants. And you may ask why we need green small hydropower. I want to back to the beginning of the presentation. We know hydropower, on one side, they have a lot of advantage, and on the other side, they have a lot of negative impacts, some environmental impacts, some society impacts. If we have a green hydropower standards, we can to make the evaluation of hydropower, whether it is green or not green, and how to make the hydropower plants more green. That is why we need the green hydropower standards. You may also ask, what is green hydropower? I think there are three critical components. First is the long-term viability of hydropower projects, and also it is very important for the contribution of the projects to the sustainable development for the local communities, for the local economies, and it has several different different sustainability dimensions, such as social, environmental, economic, technical, and governance. So this is also a reflection of the evolution of the dam planning practice. Before, it is only a problem things related to engineers, and then the economists joined in, and the environmental was considered, and also the social just joined in, and we consider more and more about the downstream impacts, the environmental impacts. So that is also very similar to the understandings of hydropower development, and that is also we from just engineering to the sustainable development of hydropower. And also, hydropower played a very important part in the global electricity production. The hydropower is about 74% of the renewables. And according to the prediction of the IEA, the hydropower generation will double by 2050 and reach 2,000 gigawatts. And mostly it's from large plants in developing economies. And when we understanding the impact of the hydropower development and also the importance of green hydropower system, we ask the question why China needs these evaluation systems. Because in China, for China, the small hydropower resource is number one in the whole world, with a very large potentials, and enjoy very fast development in the last 50 years. And there are several very important challenges for China, such as safety problems, efficiency, rural development, and the environment. For in China, the hydropower is about 20% of the whole the electricity industry, and the small hydropower is account for 27% of the whole hydropower part. In here, you can see for China's small hydropower, we enjoy a very fast development, especially in 1990s. Here is the proportion of the hydropower in whole China's electricity industry. You can see here in 1975, around 1975, it accounted for 10% of the whole installed capacity in China's electricity industry. But nowadays, it is decreased to around 4% of the whole electricity industries, because there's not so many resources, potentials in China could be developed, and the policies for development of hydropower in China is very strict, a lot of requirements nowadays. And another challenge, the first challenge for China is safety problems. That is example in 2007, that is a landslide in Majinao hydropower station boulevard, which caused 5 deaths and 1 missing after very heavy rain. And for this hydropower under construction, I have been there before the accident. That is the picture I took the 1 year before the accident happened. At that year, it also the flood is over the dam and destroyed the riverbank. Here you can see the picture, right? But after 1 year, there also caused a very serious accident, a safety accident in that hydropower plant. And also in China, the Ministry of Water Resource launched a lot of safety check activities, trying to improve the safety levels. And here's some pictures show the remove of increased parts which is not allowed in gen province, right? For the owner of the hydropower plant, they want more water to generate more electricity, which means more money. So they might increase the dam height, which is not allowed, which is not safety. And also you can see the lower of the overflow dam in Shuangshui hydropower plants in Guangdong province. So there's some example of China trying to reduce the safety risks. The second challenge for China small hydropower is efficiency. After many years operation, the low level of automation and also some serious leakage of dam, and also for the penstock is and also the aging equipment. So in 2012, around 2012, China launched a program called the efficiency improvements and capacity addition at existing small hydro plants. The ministry will give some subsidies if you make the efficiency improvements and the capacity additions for different region of China with different subsidies. Another challenge for China is the rural development. China launched a program called the National Small Hydropower Ecological Protect Projects, which is encourage the local farmers to not cut the forests, to not use firewood to cook, but use electricity to cook, which is generated by the small hydropower. They also enjoy a very cheap electricity price. So that is a good way to keep the farmers not to cut the forests, which is good for protection of the environment, protection of the forests. So that is a very typical projects or program in China. We call the National Small Hydropower Ecological Protection Projects. And the last one, which is also the most difficult one, is the environmental or ecology challenge of China water hydropower development. In different levels, we have different measures try to solve this problem, such as in the basin level. In China, we have the hydropower plan, which is make directions of where to build the hydropower, where it's not allowed to build the hydropower. So we have the hydropower plan. And in the river levels, we have the standards of healthy river assessment standards. And also in the station, the small hydropower station level, we have learned the experience in America, in Switzerland, and also in some other like the Hydropower Sustainability Association, International Hydropower Association. We have learned their experience on the green hydropower, try to solve the problems of the environment. As I told before, the green hydropower is from Switzerland, the low impact hydropower standards from America. And also the IHA, International Hydropower Association, published the Hydropower Sustainability Assessment Protocol in 2010. And also there are also some other institutions or countries, they have developed their own green hydropower standards or similar sustainability standards, such as the Mekong River Committee. They have also published some guidelines, and in Austria they have developed codes for the HYCOM. And for the International Commission for the Protection of Danube River, ICPDR, they have also published guidelines for how to develop a sustainable hydropower plant. So I will give a quite quick introduction about the green hydropower standards published by different institutions or countries, such as Here I have a summary of all these existing green hydropower standards in the world, like the small hydropower, green small hydropower assessment standard published in China, which is 2017. Now in 2021, we have revision standards, and also in Austria, they have published standards called HICOM, which is in 2015, and we have for China's version, we have learned a lot from the USA and Switzerland. Also, there's a very good sustainability hydropower protocol published by the International Hydropower Association in 2010. But there are some differences between the different standards. For China's version, we are just focusing on the small hydropower, which means less than 50 megawatts. And for the hydropower plant standards published from Austria, mainly small hydropower. For the other hydropower plant standards, mainly focusing on large hydropower plants. And also the life cycle is different. For China's version, we are only focusing on the operation stage of the hydropower development. But for the standards published by the IHA, it is covered the whole life cycle from the early stage preparation, implementation, and also the operation. They have 4 different standards, and also they have different application. Some is organized by the government, some is organized by the NGOs, and also the framework of the standards is quite different. Here you can see for China's standards, we have the total score is 100. 55% is focusing on the environment and the ecology aspects, and 18% is focusing on the society, and 18% is focusing on the management, and the last 9% focusing on the economy. And also, this evaluation is based on a on-site assessment. Nowadays, in 2018, there are 121. Nowadays, after 5 years implementation of this assessment, there are more than 870 hydropower plants have already passed the green hydropower assessment. This is the standards published from Austria. They have considering the hydropower attractiveness, and also the conservation needs, such as ecological and environmental needs. This is standards published by the Mekong River Committee. They call the guidelines of the evaluation of hydropower and the multi-purpose projects guidelines. It is used for the planning stage. And also, there is some introduction about the low impact certification standards, which is published from USA. And it covers 8 aspects, covering the air, water, land. And also, it is good, the standard is tough but achievable. It encourages hydropower plants trying to apply for the assessment or the certification of the low impact certification. A lot of hydropower plants have already been certified by the low impact, and they use a very easy way to make the assessments. It is like a questionnaire covering the flows, water quality, fish passage protection, watershed protection, threatened endangered species protection, facility recommended for removal. And it also updated the standards. The the second version, there's some change of the aspects. And also there's another standard which called the green hydropower standards developed by Switzerland. It is considering two aspects. One is the people growing concern for the conservation of the natural river ecosystem. And on the other aspects, some people are willing to pay extra for the so-called green electricity. So this standard is connected together with the green electricity mechanism. The purpose is a new assessment procedure for evaluating the environmentally harmful hydropower production. And for the green hydro, they have two different levels. One is for the eco-leveling labeling scheme for the green electricity. Another purpose is to facilitate communication with the electricity customers. And because the users of the electricity is not directly understand the quality of the electricity products, so another credible certification of high ecological standards is essential for successful green electricity marketing. And for the standards from Switzerland, they have two conditions. One is the basic requirements for green electricity, and the high level is called the eco investments. And for the people, the standards is covering two aspects. One is management fields, one is environmental fields. Here is the standards. You can see here it is the management fields covering the minimum flow, which is also we call the heat flow, environment flow, and also the hydro peaking. I think you have, which I have already talked about before, the impact of hydro peaking, and also the reservoir management, the band load management, also the power plant design. For the environmental field, it is also focusing on the hydrological parameters such as hydrological regime change, the modification of the river regimes, and also the connectivity of the river ecosystem, right? After you build a lot of dams or weirs, and also the solid material and the morphology, also the landscape, also the species, the fire signals. So for the standards by the Switzerland, they have metrics. For each element of the matrix, they have targets, criteria, literature. You could find the sort of problems and also the measures of the problems. And in short, we know for the hydropower plant owner, they need to pay the certificate costs and invest some of the eco restoration measures, and they can enjoy a very good thing in the electricity price. They will enjoy the increase of the electricity price to subsidize their inputs, their investments of the eco restoration. Also good for their company images. But for the implementation of this mechanism, after more than 16 years implementation, only about 3% of the total hydropower production in Switzerland is certified. That is another standard is from the IHA, International Hydropower Association. They have carried out sustainability guidelines and protocols. These standards covering 4 aspects such as the environmental, social, technical, and economical perspectives. But when we look back to the 2 standards we introduced before from the Switzerland, from the USA, their standards just focusing on the environment aspects. But for the standard from IHA, it is focusing on 4 different aspects, not only environment, but also social, technical, and economical aspects. So this standard is quite also covering the whole life cycle during the development of hydropower plants, from the early stage in plan, preparation, construction, and operation. But here in this presentation, we're only focusing on the standards in the operation stage. In the operation stage, they have several aspects and around 21 indicators, such as the environmental categories. They have downstream flow regimes, water quality, and in the social aspect, they have the resettlement, public health, and a lot of indicators trying to make the assessment of the hydropower development. Yes, here is the list. In operations, it is 19 indicators. And for each indicator, they have 5 levels. For the level 1, which means there are significant gaps related to the basic good practice. For the level 5, which describes proven best practice on a particular sustainability issues that is demonstrable in multiple country contexts. So for level 1 to level 5, there are different meanings. For example, for the indicator 17, water quality during the operation stage, if the water quality in the vicinity of the operating hydropower facility is not adversely impacted, it could have different scoring for 1, 2 to 3, and also for the level 5, which means in several aspects. And now I have make some comparison between these different standards, like the scale, which whether it is national standards or international standard, whether it's legally binding or just a recommendation, or it is whether it's covering the whole life cycle or only focusing on operation stage, or whether it is including pumped hydropower plant or not, whether a small hydropower, medium or large hydropower plant. So make a comparison of the different green hydropower standards, trying to find the problem, find to how to improve the hydropower the standards. Here in this picture, you could see some of the standards is pass or fail patterns. The China's version for standards from the USA, it is pass or fail. If you pass to the evaluation, pass to the assessment, you will get a label called the green hydropower or low impact hydropower. But for the other standards, it is not a pass or fail standard. It's just assessment of the status of the hydropower plants, such as the IHA version, IHA standards, Mekong River standards. So it's a little different between different standards. And also their assessment method is quite different. So they some is focusing on the project skills, complexity, public or private sector projects, whether it's mainstream or tributary. And for the standards from the American, the hydropower plants that do not involve construction, the new dams or diversion after August 1998. And also for Austria's standard, the ICON, it only includes planned new projects and planned upgrading of existing hydropower plants, rather than all the existing hydropower plants. And for China's standards also excludes the hydropower plants with some serious safety accidents, water resource disputes, something like that. So it is not every hydropower plant will apply for the certification, for the evaluation. And also it's different for the structures and results. For China standards, it simply adds the scores of each aspect in one final result. And for the IHA version, it is for China version, it is a pass or fail patterns. For IHA version, it is just to give assessment of the status of the hydropower plants. So it's quite different. And also the weight for different indicators is quite different. For Chinese, we have 55% focusing on the environmental aspects, and which is the most important things. And some of the indicators is very flexible and applicable, and some of the indicators is quantitative and specific, very specific criteria. Some is very largely based on the expert's experience. Some is very quantitative indicators. Yes, here also the green hydropower standards and also standards from USA prefer experts' opinion, but for China's version and ICOM and also mostly rely on objective and quantitative indicators instead. So there's also a comparison between different standards, the indicators. For this comparison, we can find the purpose of that is comparison is what we want to identify what is the indicators that is not included in China's version, such as here you can see for the hydro peaking, the indicators of the hydro peaking impact is not included in China's standards, which means because the understanding of hydro peaking impact in China is not quite largely understand in China. So that's why we try to make more research on that and hydro peaking impact, and maybe in the next revision of the standards, we will include the indicator of hydro peaking. And some of the indicators not included in China's version because we have other standards which is designed for the indicator. So it's quite different. That's why we make this comparison. And for the organization of the green hydropower evaluation is also quite different. For China, it's a typical government guided mode. But for the other standards, most of the evaluation is organized by the NGOs rather than the government. And in China, we started the evaluation in 2018, and we have nowadays it's already here it is not already 870 hectare plants that have been certified in 2021. I mean the China version. So that is the introduction about the international practice, their experience. And another one I want to talk about is the green hydropower practice in China. That is a more explanation of China's standards. We have 4 challenges: safety, efficiency, rural development. So this standard is focusing on the environmental challenge in China. Here's the background of why we need this standard, because at 2017, at that time, we have only standard focusing on the plan stage, design stage, construction stage, but we don't have the standards focusing on the environmental assessment during the operation stage. That's why we need to learn by experience international practice and try to push forward the China's version of green hydropower standard. In 2000, the low impact hydropower certification standard is published by the USA, and also 2001, we have the green hydropower assessment Switzerland. So in 2026, China has organized the translation of the standards from Switzerland and the low impact classification in the USA. Published the book, and from 2009 to 2011, HRC also participates in the research projects on this topic and try to push forward, try to make a lot of interviews with engineers, with authorities, try to push for China's version of green hydropower assessment standards. So in 2017, we have probably tried to put forward the trial version of these standards, and also make some pilot assessments in 2017. The Ministry of Water Resources starts trial assessment work, and that is scope and basic requirements. But here it is the history of the development of these standards. After we push forward, make a lot of pilot assessments, but these standards not officially published. So after from 2014 to 2017, these 3 years, we have tried to publish the officially standards. After the green hydropower standards is issued officially in 2017, the Ministry of Water Resources started the assessment officially assessment. So in 2017, we have the first 44 hydropower plants, which is labeled with green hydropower stations. So that's some work in 2014 can make some pilot assessments. So this is the most important one. It is 21 indicators of the green hydropower standards in China. If you see the 50% is focusing on environment, 17% society, management, and the 9% focusing on economic dynamics. The most important indicator is focusing on the minimum flow. We have talked a lot about the environment flow, the minimum flow. So this is also the most important indicator, which accounts 15% of the assessment. And if the total score is greater than 85 and the hydrology indicator is greater than 2012, the hydropower plant will be labeled as a green small hydropower station. But this activity or this program is only focusing on the existing small hydropower, which means less than 50 megawatts, and it covering 4 aspects and focusing take a very important weight on the E-flow. But it is some of the indicators not included, such as the fish class and the hydropeaking, as I talked before. And here is a small video, which is when the hydropower plants try to
双河电站位于四川省大邑县西岭镇沙坪村，系江河流域梯级开发引水式水力发电站。电站于
their hydropower plants and how they alleviate the negative impact of hydropower plants, how they make the improvements covering the environmental, the management, economic, and also society. So this is a small video introduced there. One of the hydropower plants, which is past the small green small hydropower. You can see this is quite old hydropower plant, which has already made the modification, the modernization several years before. So it's not only new hydropower plant to pass this assessment, but some very old hydropower plants, they could also pass this evaluation after they have make a lot of improvements and alleviate the negative impact of the environmental, improve their maintenance levels. So we have 19 indicators talking about how to make the evaluation of the hydropower plants. The first is about the degree of using minimum flow. If the hydropower plants is without storage, so they could not change the river regimes. They could directly get the 15 spots, 15 points. And if the hydropower plant is storage, which means they might change the water flow, right? We have talked before. And if the daily mean flow downstream of the dam or the sluice meets the ecological requirements based on the flow monitoring data, which means they have a online monitoring, and each day they have meet the requirement, they could get 15 scores. Such as there's some examples, and some installed the monitoring as a monitor, the online monitor of the environment flow. And the third indicator is focusing on the change of water quality. Most of the hydropower plants, there's no change of water quality. But you need the hydropower plant need to provide some evidence of the water quality, such as some environmental testing reports. And the fourth and the fifth indicator is focusing on the impacts on the aquatic and the terrestrial organism. The owner of hydropower plants should provide some indirect proof, such as the proof by the Bureau of Forest or Environment, or some citation from the EIA, or other proofs, such as here is some warnings, capture and use some protected ducks is illegal, and proof by the Bureau of Local Forest or Environmental Authorities. They could get the scores on these indicators. The sixth and seventh indicator is focusing on the landscape, the harmony with the landscape, or the degree of the landscape restoration. Here is an example. The river bank is destroyed during the flood season, but it did not make the restoration. So for this hydropower plant, they could not get scores for this indicator. And also the owner of hydropower plant should also provide some reports on the conservation of the water and soil reports. The eighth and the next indicator is focusing on the energy saving and the emission reduction. This quite easy, just provide some of the data, and it could be calculated directly. Use some tools to calculate some of the indicators. The 10th indicator is focusing on the resettlement. But some hydropower plants, very small one, without the resettlements, it could directly get the scores. And if there are some resettlements, they need to provide the resettlement plan, and also the satisfaction of the resettlements. They need to provide some proofs, such as registration table of the migrants, the compensation receipt, the compensation plan. So this is the 10th indicator focusing on the resettlement. The 11th, 12th, and the 13th indicator is focusing on the society, and which should provide some evidence on the society public service improvements, and also the guarantee of people's livelihoods, such as for some hydropower plants, they have built a bridge for the people living nearby, and also make some employment of the people live nearby. And even for some hydropower plants, they have make agreements with the local inhabitants that they could provide some amount of electricity free every year. And also some donation to the local school, such as this hydropower plant, they have 1.2 12,000 kilowatt hour electricity every year for free. And also they make some medical service for the people who live nearby. And also if the projects have other multiple purpose, it also could get some more scores. And the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th indicators is focusing on the management, such as safety standardization, which is another quite sophisticated assessment, which goes to the work safety standardization certification, and also some indicators on the management. The last three indicators focusing on the financial aspects. The owner of the hydropower plant should provide some of the data and whether their revenue, their net profits, the total debt assets, the total social contribution made after the calculation of these three indicators, which is evaluation of the sustainability of the hydropower plants in the economic aspects. And it also uses the tools to calculate it automatically. So at last, I want to make a conclusion that we know hydropower plants, one side is clean and renewable, another side has a lot of other negative impact and disadvantages. But if we have green hydropower evaluation, we could use this evaluation for standards to guide the green development of hydropower. I think small is necessary, and the small is if we meet all these requirements of the standards, we could say small hydropower is also green hydropower. Okay, so that is the first part of this afternoon. I have introduced green hydropower standards and talking about the impacts, especially environmental and social impacts, and also introducing some of the international practice. And at last, we spent a lot of time on the green hydropower standard in China, the China's version of green hydropower standards. And next, we will talk about how, after we make the evaluation, we want to know how to restore the negative impacts of hydropower development. So let's have a break, and then we will continue. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Before the second part of the presentation, I don't know whether you have some questions regarding to the first part. If you have some questions, you can ask some questions, or during the second part, you can also just call me, just unmute your microphones, and if you have some questions, you can ask. Okay. Okay, so I will continue this afternoon presentation. The second part is about the ecological restoration of river reaches impacted by small hydropower. And we will talking about 4 aspects. Firstly, the background, why we talking about these topics, and the second one is how to maintain the environmental flow, and the third part is talking about the retirement of small hydropower, and also other mitigation measures of hydropower development. Here, talking about the background, I showed some videos, which is nearly 40 years ago. That is video recorded the construction of the dam, of the reservoirs. You could see that's very simple tools, even built the dam during winter times without any modern tools. There is also some pictures like the female workers of Banqi plant carrying stones, and the celebration of first generation of Dayang, second Cascade hydropower plant, that is nearly 50 years before. And also they did in 1970s, after building of the dam and the install of the small hydropower, the rural electrification is accomplished at that time. A lot of used for the lighting, for the rural irrigation. So it's very useful for the rural development at that time. And this is also the picture I have already introduced. Here you could see before 1970s, the 1990s, the increase of the hydropower development is very fast. And after 1995, the increase rate is decreased, but the installed capacity is increased quite a lot. And this is also the green hydropower, including not only small but also medium and large hydropower plants. We have talked in the first presentation about the environmental and the ecological impact of hydropower, and also different types of hydropower developed with different impacts, and also some impacts on the fish, different factors such as the impoundment, hydropeaking, reservoir flushing, diversion of the water flow to the, and also, but after that, after more than 100 years development of hydropower, the first hydropower plant in China is in 1912. So, which means the history in China's hydropower development is more than 100 years. In recent years, a lot of challenges and problems are focusing on the environmental mitigation, which in China, several ministries, 4 ministries, have launched a small hydropower greening, especially Yangtze River economic belt region, which is around half of the hydropower plants in China is located in Yangtze River basin. This activities or its program is launched by Ministry of Water Resource, which is in charge of the small hydropower development, and also the National Development Reform Committee, Ministry of Ecological and Environment, National Energy Administration. So this four ministry started a program trying to find the problems, trying to find the negative impacts, identify the negative impacts, and also some problems, some problems of the license, some permits, whether you have every permits or whether it is illegal construction. So that is started from 2019 to 2020. And there are several very important years during the development of hydropower. In 1989, China officially published the Environmental Protection Law, and in 1994, the National Reserve Regulation is published in China, which means the hydropower plants located in National Reserve should be retired, which is not illegal. And also in 1998, the Law of Environmental Impact Assessment law is also published. So after that, the requirement of hydropower development and operation is more strict. And yes, as I talked before, in the Yangtze River economic belt, which have nearly more than half of the hydropower plants, which is around 24,000 hydropower plants in Yangtze River Basin. The total hydropower plants at 2018 is around 46,000 hydropower plants, and which contributes 40%. The Yangtze River belt region here, especially in South China, contributes to over 40% of both the population and the GDP of China. So it's a quite large aspect, and with a lot of hydropower plants. And in 2016, President Xi says to make all-out efforts to protect the Yangtze River and forbidding large-scale development of the river. So that is the change of the river development, which make every all-out efforts to protect it, the ecological and also the environment of the Yangtze River Basin. That's why the National Audit Office have conducted an audit of 11 provinces in Yangtze River Basin, and they identified some of the problems, some of the things happened that is not allowed, or maybe not even illegal in Yangtze River belt. That is some problems. First, such as the density of small hydropower development of some reach of the river is too high. Maybe just 10 kilometers, there's several hydropower plants have been developed. And also the newly installed capacity of small hydropower in 5 provinces exceeds the planned goals. We have a plan and then there's different projects, but the newly installed capacity exceeds the planned goals. And also 970 hydropower plants in 8 provinces started the construction without EIA permit, which means these hydropower plants is not illegal according to the EIA law. And also 78 hydropower plants in 6 provinces have been developed within the protected areas, even after the establishment of the natural reserve. That is also illegal, right? We know in the protected areas, there's not allowed, there's no permit of the projects construction. but there are 78 hydropower plants is in the protected areas after the implementation of the Nature Reserve Law. And also 1,400, more than 1,400 retired hydropower with barriers, with some small dams have not been removed in time, which also makes some negative impact of the river connectivity. And 86% of the 6,000 hydropower plants without efflow discharge, with efflow discharge facility has not realized online monitoring. Right, we in China, the hydropower plants are required to have the monitoring to ensure the environment flow, and also some reaches of 300, more than 300 rivers has suffered from dewatering, with total length up to more than 1,000 kilometers, because the diversion of water from the river reach to the to generate electricity, which caused the river rate between the dam and the power plants dry out. So that's identified a lot of problems. That's why the 4 ministries started activity to solve these problems. So there have been 5 steps to start to accomplish this work. First is the problem identification, and the second one is classification. Each of the hydropower plants will be classified to one of the 3 categories. First, if there are 5 conditions, if such as the hydropower plants is in the protected areas, or it is illegal, if there are 5 conditions, if it is have the 5 conditions, one of the 5 conditions, it will be classified as retirement. And if all the if the hydropower plant has all the legal permits and it's not in the protected areas, in local areas, and also the efflow discharge is good, they could be classified as reservation. They can keep the hydropower plants as before. All the other hydropower plants will be classified as renovation. So each of the hydropower plants will be classified as one of the 3 categories. So that's the second steps is classification. After the classification for the retirement hydropower plants, they need to draft a retirement plan, the implementation plan, and to make the retirement. And for the hydropower plants classified as renovation, they need to have one small hydropower, one solution, right? For different hydropower, their problems is different. Their solutions must be different. So we call the one small hydropower with one tailored solutions. The solutions including several aspects such as the efflow determination. Some of the hydropower plants developed many years ago, they are not required to discharge the efflow. But nowadays, they need to determine efflow to ensure the river connectivity, to keep the rivers alive. And another second measures for the renovation or the restoration is the efflow facilities. Some old hydropower plants don't have the efflow discharge facilities. They need to make some engineering measures to add new efflow facilities, or to make some modification of the existing facilities to discharge the efflow. And also, each of the hydropower plants should have the efflow monitoring. And for some hydropower plants with reservoirs, they need to have some eco operation or eco restoration. And another measures is to make all the licenses and all the permits. That is the third steps. And the first step is for the rectification. They have one small hydropower have one solution. So they have around half to 1 year for the rectification. And at last, before the end of 2020, we need to finish all the renovation or the retirement. And at the end of the 2020, there will be assistance and review of whether all the goals, all the measures has been accomplished. But for some of the retirement, maybe they have some other reasons they could not be retired before the end of 2020. They are allowed to have some several years. The deadline will be delayed, and so that is background. That is the things we have done in recent years. And the second part I want to talking about is how to keep the environment flow. And there's also a small video recorded the e-flow facility and its bulk. They discharge the e-flow below the dam. And also we have talked about these pictures, the e-flow operation, the ecological flow, right? And here I also want to emphasize the meanings of the e-flow, the ecological meanings of the e-flow, right? For this picture, you could see for the stable base flow, especially the minimum flow, they are very important for the life history patterns, for the spawnings, for the recruitment. And during the flood season, for the high flow, it also has some ecological meanings, such as the lateral connectivity, not only the longitude connectivity, but also the lateral connectivity is very important for the high flow and also the low flow. And also for the seasonality, it also have some channel forms. Habitat complexity is very meaningful for the ecological meanings. So that's why we need e-flow. And e-flow is not only the minimum e-flow, it also patterns. You can see sometimes you need to the high flow, sometimes the river ecosystem needs low flow. So it is quite useful for the e-flow. And for how to determine the e-flow, there are a lot of methods, a lot of standards published. In China, we have a specification to calculate environmental flow in rivers and lakes, and also codes standards for calculation of ecological flow of hydropower plants. In China, we have some of these standards. And also we have learned some experience from other countries, such as in Austria, their minimum flow is greater than 3 mean annual flow, and the lowest daily flow. That is how they determine the minimum flow. And also they have another flow called the natural dynamic over time to ensure the seasonality of the natural relocation and the type-specific composition of the sediment to find sediment to prevent the soil clogging. And also considering about the spawning season, the habitat, the temperature, a lot of meanings of the e-flow, not only the minimum flow. And for the regulations in Austria, it is legally binding. But nowadays in China, several years before, it is not legally binding. But nowadays, China updated the laws and the regulations. Nowadays in China, the discharge of e-flow is also legally binding. And the second step, after you determine the e-flow, the next very important task is for the discharge facility. As I told before, some of the dams built very many years ago, they don't have the discharge facilities. So you could see some of the dams has opened the channel for e-flow discharge on the existing dams. And even some discharging facilities open a hole on the gate here like this for inflow discharge. Actually, this is not good for the safety of the gate, right? But for the small ones, for the very small small gate is okay. That is that's a very low cost measures to keep the inflow facility. And also, we determine the inflow. We have the inflow discharge facility, and then the third requirement is focusing on inflow monitoring. Each of the hydropower plants should have the monitoring facilities, and also make public near the hydropower plants, near the dam. This place shows for this specific hydropower plants, the inflow is 7.57 cubic meter per second, and you could also try to make the public. And also some of the counties or the cities, they have launched a monitoring platform to make some cameras or some meters, some monitoring facilities. And the fourth measures of eco operation is another way for, especially for the runoff river type of hydropower plants. They just changed the operation modes to eco operation. They could to ensure the environment flow, such as the hydropower plants in North China, that is state-owned small hydropower discharge the inflow first, which has had a demonstration effect to the private small hydropower. Although it could lose 15 million RMB per year, right? If you change to eco operation mode, this is not very good for the electricity generation. Then may cause some loss of the generation of electricity. And there's also some examples to make some changes of the gate which discharge the inflow. And we also try to learn some experience from other countries. And that is the fish pass. Here, it also a fish pass. During the fishes go upstream for the migration. In the fish in here, they're trying to go upstream for the spawning. This is migrating fishes. There are some videos. And okay. And we also learned some experience from a small hydropower in Austria. They have made a very good experience on how to improve, how to mitigate the negative impact of hydropower plant. This is a very typical divergent type of hydropower plants. Here is the dam. Here is the dam, the gate. They divert. They have a channel. They have a penstock to the power plant here, and so the river reach between the dam and the power plants, there the decreased water in this river reach. And what they have done is try to build fish paths near the dam, and also to have a ecological unit to discharge the inflow, and at the same time build some electricity generation. For this hydropower plant, it's have a very long history. It's established in 1921, which means 100 years old, the hydropower plant. And in 1995 to 1994 to 1995, this hydropower plant has enjoyed modernization with performance increase the efficiency, which means the new turbines, new generators, and distribution pipelines new technologies, and also it have efficiency increase and performance increase and output increase. And we spent 8 months, but this is only focusing on the efficiency increase. But in 2013 to 14, they have made eco-friendly modernization. For this hydropower plant has supplied over 25,000 households with energy from hydropower plant for nearly 90 years. Actually, it is more than 100 years now. And apart from the construction of the fish ladder, the weir in Gosling was modernized, and the flood protection was also improved. That is what is eco-friendly modernization means. They have done several measures. Another measures is residue water. The residue water actually is environment flow. In Austria, they try to call it residue water, actually, which means environment flow. Environment will increase from previously 0.25 cubic meter per second to up to 2.2 cubic meter per second. You could see the increase of the environment flow is very large, and the water volume remains in river is now at least 5 times higher, right? So they increase the environment flow very high, and also the rehabilitation of existing tunnels were carried out in parallel to the construction of new weir system. So, before the environment flow is only to 0.25, they increased to 1.7, even to 2.2. So you could see very clearly increase improvement of the river ecosystem, the covering of the riverbed, right? For the growth is just 0.25, but when the flow increased to 1.7, it's a very good improvement of the river ecosystem. And they have done make a lot of preparations, such as the fish ecology investigation by the universities. They have made some investigation, and also examination of the overall hydraulic system, and also presentation of the preliminary projects and pre-examination by the water authorities, a lot of permits, and at last they have constructed a rehabilitation of the tunnel and the application for regaining water rights for these hydropower plants. So after more than 1 year construction, they have made the eco-friendly modernization. They have a new gauge. They have made a new small residue water turbine. They use environment flow to discharge some more electricity and to keep the environment flow discharge. And the third part the measures I want to talk about is about the smart power retirement. We have learned some experience from America, because they have published some guidelines for retirement of dams and hydraulic facilities, and also dam removal science and decision makings. And in China, in 2003, Ministry of Water Resources has published the management regulations of reservoir degrading and removal. And also in Zhejiang province, they have published the management regulation of small hydropower retirement. And in some counties, they even published the compensation standard for small hydropower retirement to encourage some very old hydropower plants to retire. And also, as I talked before, from 2018 to 2020, China has started activities to identify the problems and to classify all the hydropower plants to 3 categories. One of the category is retirement. And for some hydropower plants with serious impact, especially in protected areas. Some is legal issues, some is not, some is illegal. They don't have the permits. There's an example which is small hydropower plants in Qilian Mountain Natural Reserve. Before they have 60 hydropower plants. 27 hydropower plants is in the core area, and 15 hydropower plants is in the buffer area, and the other hydropower plants is in the transition area. After the retirement of the hydropower plants, only 2 is in the core area because they have some water supply or irrigation functions, and all the other 25 hydropower plants in core area will be removed, and they also make an implementation plan. Some is will be retired at the same year, and some in next year, some in 2021, or even some of the projects they will be retired before 2032 because they have some other functions. They need to substitution of their functions. And also in Fujian, in Southeast China, they also make some hydropower retirement, such as in Yongchun County. We have made some investigation about the small hydropower retirement. You could see the turbines unit has been removed, and the water, the river has back to the natural water regimes. That is retirement of the divergent type of small hydropower. The water before, the water is diverted through this this channel to the hydropower plant, but nowadays they have removed the hydropower plant, and the water is back to the river reach. And even they have used the river for some tourism activities, such as drifting tourism, to keep the, and some of the retired powerhouse, the power plants has turned to museum, coffee bar, or even bookstores near the township or near the city. They can change the power to another ways. There are some examples in Fujian province how to make the hydropower plant retire, make the retirements. First, they need to make the investigation and also make to draft a plan and the implementation of the retirements, and also make the assessment and make public. And also after the retirement, after the removal of the power plant powerhouse, they need to make acceptance procedures. At last, even some subsidy mechanisms will be implemented. So for the natural, for the dam removal, a lot of institutions or agency or stakeholders is included in all these procedures, such as price agency, maybe some subsidies, and asset assessment company, and yeah, most importantly, the owner of hydropower plants, but their plants will be removed, and also other water authority agency, fiscal agency, etc. For this example, at first in March 2015, they will make the preliminary investigation. Water agency and the fiscal agency of the province, city, and county level, and also the owner of the hydropower, and also the implementation of the plan of the retirement and the asset assessment, make public, and all this nearly 1 year. They spent nearly 1 year to make the hydropower plant retirement. And in 2015, two counties started the pilot retirement of small hydropower projects in Fujian. And the three categories of measures has been proposed depending on the complexity of different types of hydropower. Not all the hydropower plants will be removed, but some of the hydropower plants will have limited operation, especially in the winter season, because at that time there's very little water flow. It's quite hard for the hydropower plant to ensure the environment flow discharge. So at that period, they are not allowed to generate electricity, but to lead the water back to the river. So this is another measures, which is called limited operation. And some of the some of the hydropower plants will be renovated, targeting to the hydropower plants that are available to discharge the efflow through rehabilitation and greater than 200 kilowatts. And at the same time, the Fujian province, they have tried a new mechanism, tried a new regulations on ecological electricity price for hydropower station in Fujian province. For the hydropower plants with ecological renovation or unit addition for ecological flow, the ecological renovation referred to, they will get some subsidies. For the hydropower with limited operation, which means the hydropower which cannot meet the requirement of ecological flow and implemented limited operations through change of operation modes, which means eco operation, or suspend power generation. They will also give some subsidies. Or for the hydropower plants, which updating their monitoring data more than 90%, and also they meet the requirement of the efflow more than 90%, which means 90% a day of the year they meet the requirement, the efflow, they discharge the efflow according to the requirements. They will get a 2 cents per kilowatt hour increase of their price sold to the grid. So that's a very good incentives to the owner of hydropower plants to encourage them to discharge the efflow and keep the river health. And if they are not meet the requirements of the efflow, less than 50%, they will get a punishment, decrease of the price sold to the efflow. So that's a very innovative way to encourage and to make some punishment of the hydropower plants, whether they meet the requirement. However, these measures, these policies is not continued nowadays. That is published in 2017, but nowadays it's not continue in effect because there is some problem during the implementation of this policy. There's not enough money, not enough incentives. There are a lot of along with improvements of the hydropower plants, they discharge most of the hydropower plants discharge the efflow greater than 90%. But there's no ways to have the money that's given to the owner of the small hydropower. That is why this policy could not be sustainable. That is quite a pity. And the last part is talking about the other mitigation measures for the small hydropower restoration. We also learned some experience from other countries. They have also made this nearly the same thing. Here you could see they have take a lot of measures, such as ecological connectivity, which means most of them is fish path, the fish paths, and also the morphology, some measures, and also the residue water, which means the inflow. Here you could see most of the 68% of the measures is focusing on the ecological connectivity, not only the inflow, because in Austria their law have some requirements which required every hydropower plant in the river reach that have fishes, they need to keep the fish upstream and downstream migration. So they need to have the fish paths to keep the fish go downstream or upstream. That's why 68% of the measures is focusing on the inflow activity. And for the environment flow, because before they have already, most of the hydropower plants in Austria have already meet that requirements. So only 13% of the measures is focusing on the inflow discharge. And also there are some morphology measures to improve the water river reach between the dam and the powerhouse. Here is some examples of the before. This is older dam barrier. Before the beginning of construction of the at the river, there's no fish paths, no inflow discharge. After the measures have been implemented, the new fish built here, and also they discharge the inflow. Another types of mitigation measures for the wear passes. Also, they use these ways for the fish paths. And there's also another types of fish paths, which go to the rock ramp passes. Here's an example before. This is actually it's not a high dam, it's a quite small dam, but the fish do not go upstream in this river. But after they have taken some measures, they have changed the small dam to a very slow ramp. They could disperse the riverbed ramp after reconstruction. For this dam, we have visited this ramp, this slope on site. You could see clearly the fish could go upstream through this very low slope to go upstream, because in the upstream there's a lake. The fish, one of the type of the fish need to go upstream to the lake for the spawning. That's why they changed the dam to new ramp, and the fish could go swim to have some rest, and they will go upstream very easily. That's a very good example for the restoration of the to restore the river connectivity, and also some technical fish paths. And also we have visited some technical slots, fish paths. The fish go in this way to the upstream. And also another examples for the fish paths there's also a ecological unit here. They install a very small unit to discharge to generate electricity, and at the same time they also is a good way to discharge inflow and to decrease the losses of the generation, electricity generation. Yeah, here you can see the ecological unit, because this unit is located at just below the dam. They use the discharge of the water for the inflow and also for some electricity generation. This is the fish paths. And also another typical measure is called the fish lift. They use the lift to carry the fish, go to the fish paths and go into the lift and go up and through this tunnel to the upstream. So they could go upstream for the migrations. Here, there's another perspective to see the fish go into the fish path, the lift, and yeah, this is the lift and go upstream. And also for the downstream migration, we also need some measures try to avoid fish go into the inlets and also maybe cause some damage, some injuries during their go into the turbine, or even use some friendly fish, environmental fish friendly turbines. Another mitigation measures is about the structuring of the environment flow section. This is from the upstream, from the downstream view. They also use this, the groundings are inclined against the direction of flow offset, so that a meandering channel lines was initiated. Yes, before we usually try to go a very strict river ridge, but nowadays we know the meandering river ridge have some ecological meanings. Here's also another example for the groundings during the low water level, groundings during mean water level. It's very useful for the meandering river, and even some places it's good for the fish to have some rest or even for spawning. This is also a research channel in Danube River. And there's also another examples from Switzerland. In Switzerland, in Sweden, there's an institution that initiates stakeholders discussion and the yearly conference between the energy sector and the environmental sector. And they also suggest a production loss of 2.3% of total hydropower production for mitigation measures, right? If you discharge the efflow, which means some electricity loss, production loss. And also, but in Sweden, they set a plan for 20 years to make the mitigation measures. But in China, we took just 3 years for the mitigation measures. But for Sweden, they have will be adaptable if the energy system changes for new environmental technologies, and they have made very detailed plan for the mitigation measures. And also they set fund 1.2 billion set aside in a bond to finance the mitigation measures. And mitigation measures in traditional mitigation measures before in Sweden, they just were focusing on environment flow, a fixed minimum flow, that is just 5% of the average flow. In China nowadays, it's also a fixed minimum flow, is 10% of the average flow, and also they considering about physical habitat like the spawning, gravel, the fish stocking, and nowadays they are changing from fixed flow environment flow to environment flow assessment, and even use 2D, 3D hydraulic modeling for habitat for optimization, and also improvement of the natural structures. This is nowadays in this 20 in the plan. In the next 20 years, they will do these measures, and also they think some other things they are not done either about they want to accomplish the fish pass for all types of migratory fish. Nowadays, they only considering some of the types of fish in that, and nowadays in the future they want the fishes passes for all types of migratory fish species, and also they want to consider more about the sediment management and even ice management, temperature regulations. So this is about some experience from China, from Austria, from Sweden, and we try to restore the impact on hydropower development and to make the hydropower more green. And okay, that is the end of the second part of the presentation. And I think if you have some questions, you can ask some questions or some comments. You are welcome. Okay, do you have some questions? Regarding to both the first presentation or the second presentation, or even some comments or stuff. You want to say something? Do you have some questions? Yeah, you can give your comments or your in the chat box. And also, if you, I think I have leave my email in the presentation. You can also, if you have some other questions or some comments, you can also give an email. Yeah, you can use your microphone to comment or leave your question in the chat box.
Thanks for Dr. Cui, or do we have some comments on the presentation? You can turn on your microphone. So if there's no questions, so let's call it the end of this afternoon's presentation. So thank you again, Professor Cui, for giving us such a good presentation on green hydropower and the ecological restoration of the river reaches impacted by the small hydropower. Thank you for sharing with us the experience and knowledge and the practice in China, also in China and also abroad. Thank you again.
Thank you. From the fish class, how many percent of fish can pass, and depending on port and yeah, I see some questions. For the fish pass, yes. For example, for the some water fish pass, fish lift, they will be installed some cameras to record every fish go through the fish lift or fish pass to make some statistics for different types of fish and the numbers and the percentage of the fish, so they can make more investigation, make some research on how many types of fish can easily go through this fish pass or fish lift. And also, yes, it depends on the kind of fish. Different kind of fish, they have different swim capabilities, and some of the very strong, they can go swim upstream very easily, but some is they could not. Yes, I think your question is right. And for first, you have so already, but want to clarify more. One, does hydropower impact to the aquatic ecosystem in rivers? How does it change hydropower impact to the aquatic ecosystem? Yes, and there are different types of hydropower plants have different impacts. First, for the hydropower with dam, they may change the hydrological regime of the river, right? As I showed in the presentation, for the natural, they have a blue curve. During the flood season, they have a lot of water flow, but in winter, in dry season, they have a low flow. But if you build the dam, after you build the dam, they will change the river regimes. So that is have some negative impact to the aquatic ecosystems in rivers. And also for building of the dam, the connectivity of the river upstream and downstream will be damaged. They also cause some negative impact to the aquatic ecosystem. And also for another type, for the divergent type, they also divert the water to generate electricity. So the river between the dam and the powerhouse will have less water, even dry out. So that is a disaster for the river reach, for the between this the dam and the powerhouse. That is very negative impact to the aquatic ecosystems. Right? If you don't have water, there's no life in the river. You could not call it is a river reach. And yes, I think in the presentation I have talked about several mitigation measures. And, okay, I think I'm not sure whether my answer to your questions. Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, our second session will begin after 1 hour, and we will begin in 6 p.m. Beijing time. So see you here. See you there. Bye bye.